We reached a $150 million settlement with Purdue Pharma Canada.
The $8 billion settlement, the most dramatic effort yet by the federal government to hold a drug maker accountable for the more than 450,000 American deaths from opioid addiction.
Judy, new numbers out today from the CDC show how drug overdoses have surged during the pandemic. More than 107,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 2021. That's the highest annual death toll ever recorded, and a 15% increase from the year before.
Will you apologize for the role you played in the opioid crisis?
I have struggled with that question. There's nothing that I can find that I would have done differently.
Since I've been on this new pain medication, I have not missed one day of work, and my boss really appreciates that. Lauren is there every day, so I'm able to be very productive, person again, which is really great.
How did manipulative practices around prescription opioids skyrocket their use and eventually lead to the opioid epidemic currently plaguing North America? Opioids have been used for millennia, from the ancient Greek, Roman, and Middle Eastern civilizations to even well-known leaders like Adolf Hitler and Napoleon Bonaparte. Scientific advancements in the 19th and 20th centuries would increase opioid use, and the extraction of morphine from opium, the invention of the hypodermic syringe, and the synthesis of morphine and other synthetic derivatives. Ultimately, these potent synthetic and semi-synthetic opioids will become a foundational factor in the opioid epidemic. The widespread illicit use of opioids existed long before these pharmaceutical-grade opioids, with heroin generally being the substance of choice. Its use waxed and waned throughout the years, with a few surges in use, particularly in the early 1900s, which was curtailed by the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act, and again in the late 1960s and early 70s. These latter surges were managed through tough laws enacted to impact the supply of heroin being smuggled from other countries, and generally the introduction of methadone as a replacement opioid therapy. Additionally, this era of heroin abuse was generally confined to urban areas in the Northeast and Southwest, with little heroin availability in rural areas and other smaller cities. As the 90s and 2000s rolled around, the patterns and demographics surrounding opioid use began to change, mainly due to the availability of prescription opioids. In the 60s, those that abused opioids tried heroin as their first opioid over 80% of the time. Now in 2000, 75% of opioid abusers first started with a prescription opioid. These changes around opioid trends line up with the huge increase in opioid prescribing in the US. From 1997 until 2007, retail sales of opioids overall increased 149%. Oxycodone alone saw a dispensing increase of 866% during this time period. With the rise of prescription opioids, 1995 brings a huge date. That's when Oxycontin, the first 12-hour controlled release formulation of oxycodone, was approved, allowing dosing twice per day instead of every 4 to 6 hours. The first long-acting opioid, MS-Contin, was approved in 1987, and its medical use was not associated with misuse, likely due to its strict use in cancer patients and in hospice care.
There's no question that our best, strongest pain medicines are the opioids, but these are the same drugs that have a reputation for causing addiction and other terrible things. Now, in fact, the rate of addiction amongst pain patients who are treated by doctors is much less than 1%.
The FDA determined, based on studies included in Purdue Pharma's NDA for OxyContin, that it had no advantage over immediate-release oxycodone, other than less frequent dosing. However, FDA used the prior marketing history of MS-Contin to believe that these controlled-release formulations had less abuse potential. Labeling of OxyContin warned that crushing and then injecting a tablet could lead to overdose, but the FDA failed to foresee the abuse potential of simply crushing and orally ingesting the tablet, which completely bypassed the controlled-release mechanism. Manufacturer Purdue's aggressive marketing campaign began the moment the drug was first available in 1996, with sales growing initially from $48 million to $1.1 billion in 2000. Massive promotion of the drug to a variety of audiences is what led to the huge commercial success. Post-market Phase 4 studies in 2001 and literature reviews of OxyContin showed no benefit or advantage compared to controlled-release morphine or conventional instant-release oxycodone. In 2001 alone, Purdue Pharma spent $200 million on its advertising, marketing, and promoting of OxyContin. In the year of its release, Purdue held over 40 pain management conferences in all-expenses-paid resorts, inviting over 5,000 doctors, pharmacists, and nurses. While prescribers tend to be adamant these types of conferences don't impact prescribing practices, there's substantial evidence that it does. In more precise and nefarious methods, Purdue used very sophisticated data to compile profiles on the prescribing practices of physicians. These can be used by pharmaceutical companies to identify the largest prescribers of certain drugs by state, by county, by zip code, or even in the country, and was foundational for Purdue's marketing plan to target physicians who are already the largest opioid prescribers. On the patient end, sales reps of Purdue were able to offer patient starter coupons for free OxyContin prescriptions. By the time the program ended in 2001, over 34,000 coupons were redeemed. To further motivate sales reps, lucrative bonuses were offered. Base salary in 2001 was about $55,000, and an average bonus was about $71,000, and some sales reps earning a whopping $240,000. Another key facet of the sales tactic was to understate the addictive property of the drug, especially when used chronically for non-malignant pain. They'd train sales reps to parrot the message that the risk of addiction was less than 1%, even though this was untrue. This was justified by citing studies assessing opioid addiction of the context of acute pain in a hospital setting. These obviously don't establish the risk with chronic daily opioid use. Through a 2003 warning letter, the FDA cracked down on some of Purdue's advertising practices. Their claims in the medical journals were not in line with the approved use of OxyContin. They grossly overestimated the safety and downplayed the addiction potential, and had misleading and unacceptable claims and imagery in their advertisements. In April 2013, the FDA continued its action by withdrawing the original formulation of OxyContin on the basis of safety reasons. Purdue had gotten a new formulation of it approved in 2012, along with updating the labeling, which had more physical and chemical properties to prevent abuse by injection or nasal administration. It took 18 years for the FDA to actually take action on Purdue, and by 2013, America was deep in the opioid crisis. Here's a commercial video distributed to over 15,000 doctors in 1998 by Purdue sales reps with patient testimonials about OxyContin. This video was not submitted to the FDA, which is a violation of federal law, yet there was absolutely no punishment from the FDA.
I got my life back now. Now I can enjoy every day that I live. I can really enjoy myself. And before...
I'm currently at 1,200 milligrams of long-acting oxycodone. So, now this medication does not turn you into a zombie. It has turned me into an active person again.
He was at the point where could be sitting in here talking like I'm talking and fall right off to sleep while he was talking.
It stopped working and it got increased. I think it was 40 in the morning and 40 in the evening. And then eventually that got increased. I lost my job and I lost my insurance. So it got to the point where I couldn't afford it. Horrible time of my life. The withdrawals were just unbelievable.
I am afraid that people like me, patients with legitimate chronic pain who can't live without these kinds of drugs, in addition to other things I do to manage the pain, I'm afraid we're the ones that are going to pay for it. We'll be made to suffer.
As seen from clips in the video, the patient perspective can be wildly different depending on their circumstances. Not treating pain in patients is cruel, and pain management is crucial for comfort. No medical professional is arguing with the use of opioids to treat acute pain or for cancer pain, but the crossover from acute to chronic is where opioids become dangerous and plain ineffective. Well-planned pain management following surgery is important, such that pain is well controlled, and the patient is given a reasonable amount of pills if opioids are needed. Over 66% of people obtain opioids for non-medical use from friends and relatives, and these are likely leftover pills from old prescriptions. With Purdue's countless lawsuits, their reputation is not what it once was. However, they're attempting many ways to sway the public opinion and help them forget about the atrocities they're primarily responsible for. They've started to give paltry donations in comparison to their sales numbers to help establish and run prescription drug monitoring programs. $1 million for Florida's PDMP eForsk, and $3.1 million for Virginia's PDMP. This will be able to show prescribers and dispensers a more detailed history on opioid prescribing on an individual basis, and will heavily cut down on doctor shopping. The FDA is not without blame, however. They clearly did not enforce the FDCA on Oxycontin's NDA. They allowed Purdue to label and market the product with incredibly broad indications. There has been some egregious conflict of interest. The two lead reviewers who initially approved Oxycontin's NDA at the FDA eventually moved on and took paid positions at Purdue Pharma. In 2002, when the FDA convened a meeting due to rapidly increasing opioid prescriptions, they brought in 10 industry experts, 8 of which who had financial ties to pharmaceutical companies, and 5 of those 8 had financial ties to Purdue. In conclusion, they advised the FDA against the narrowing of indications for opioids. The FDA has introduced more specific risk evaluation and mitigation strategies for opioids, and prescription drug collection programs have increased, and the FDA has made resources available to patients to inform them on safe disposal of controlled substances, which is critical for preventing OxyContin and other controlled substances from being diverted. For the future of the opioid crisis, the initiation of long-term opioids needs to be controlled further. Improving awareness about the inefficacies of opioids for chronic pain is crucial, as many doctors are not updated on the current opioid evidence. The FDA needs to have a tighter grip on indications for opioids so that they're only prescribed for patients who need them, and they need to use a stronger hand when they need to enforce broken rules. Additionally, we need to use what we learned from the opioid crisis in North America to prevent these pharmaceutical companies trying similar business techniques in developing nations. Unfortunately, this is already in progress, and pharma companies see big dollar signs. Mundi Pharma, owned by the same family as Purdue, is trying to market OxyContin and other strong opioids across the world, where they are prescribed much less frequency. They send doctors overseas to preach the benefits of opioids to foreign doctors, trying to cure those doctors of the opioid phobia, much similar to the pain management conferences held by Purdue in the late 90s. History does seem to repeat itself.